Welcome to the Strong Enough podcast, where we talk about the challenges and celebrate the triumphs of people just like you. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to share why she chose trauma-informed therapy and related practices as her way to help others. She's also going to talk about the mind-body connection and why it's so important, particularly to those who have suffered trauma or abuse. Please help me welcome Dr. Amelia Kelly. Good afternoon, Dr. Kelly. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and I would love to point out that we have a connection. You are in North Carolina, is that correct?
I am. Yep, right outside Raleigh.
And I spent most of my life in North Carolina. I went to high school in Durham.
Hmm.
So the first question I think I have to ask you before we dive into anything is, are you a Tar Heel or a Blue Devil?
So I'm actually neither
Okay,
because I'm a New Yorker.
right on.
And I have always said I don't really feel like New Yorkers are very heavy into, and I might be making an assumption for everyone, into college sports because
Mhm.
we've got all the huge professional teams up there. So when I moved down here and saw that it was such a divide,
Mhm.
even like romantic relationships were being impacted by this. I thought it was pretty wild, but I guess I would have to say neither, and I'd have to go with state because my husband likes state.
Okay, I'm okay with that, so we can continue the conversation.
Good.
Now that we've gotten that out of the way, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so as you mentioned, I'm located in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a trauma-informed therapist. I've been working about 18 years now, worked with so many different populations, but found that trauma and interpersonal relationship recovery and a bit of substance abuse work and some neurodiversity work is where my heart's at. I'm also a author, co-author of What I Wish I Knew: Surviving and Thriving After an Abusive Relationship. I wrote with a survivor of intimate partner violence. I'm also a podcaster, teacher, trainer, meditation teacher, yoga teacher. I don't know. If it's something interesting and I think it'll bring healing to people, I find I gravitate towards that. I joke that I'm not very smart at a lot. I'm really smart about a little. I would be the worst trivia co-team mate.
I don't know, we do have a trivia team, and I feel like you named a lot of things that could be very, very helpful. So I
I
don't I
might know,
don't
like, yeah, like the medical stuff I might know, and like a random travel thing every once in a while. But other than that,
there you go. I always need a geography person because I'm lucky to know where my state is, and some of the other ones, but outside of that, I'm fairly useless. I would love to hear how trauma informed became a passion for you.
So it's kind of ironic that you're asking this week with all the things happening in the world.
Mhm.
I think that it actually began as some generational trauma. My family are actually refugees from the Ukraine.
Wow.
Right. So mom is first generation. So there was always this kind of underlying current growing up where I knew that trauma had impacted my family. And so a little bit of that mixed with just a passion for psychology, I went into that field. However, I underwent some of my own traumas with fertility and some other things in my personal life that led me to see that kind of all of our neuroses and all of our suffering all normally roots back to that. But for me too, the body is huge. Like this, I think this new approach, and it shouldn't be that new, but this really important redirection into incorporating the body into trauma work. I think if that hadn't been happening, I don't know if it would have clicked or gelled as well for me. I've been a dancer when I was a child and yoga teacher now, and so I've always thought the body is so pivotal.
Mhm.
So it's just this perfect storm between my family, my experiences, my clients informing me, and what's happening in our world of psychology. Boom, trauma.
Here you are. I
Yes,
want to divert just for a quick second. Do you still
yeah,
have family in Ukraine?
I do. I have a great uncle and some cousins. I mean, the last time I spent time with them, I was a child, so it's been a while. But as far as I know, everyone's okay right now. So thank you for asking them.
It's been, I don't even know the right word, bizarre for me. It's been so sad. And this feels so very different than some of the other wars and things that the US has been directly involved in. And I'm not sure why. Are you experiencing that, or are you seeing some of your patients that are experiencing that as well? That this just feels different, more impactful?
Right. So it's interesting because a lot of the situations that have happened over the last 2 years between COVID and BLM and Me Too and all these huge movements, um, I've been able to relate a lot to my clients and kind of offer that safe vessel. Right now, and I don't do this often, I actually canceled a session last week. Like right when I had heard from a family member, and it was one of those moments in trauma work. It's very important for us to be prepared and available. I was not available in that moment. So I think that's been interesting, when you kind of approach it as a wounded healer, like kind of figuring out how do I continue to support someone who maybe is not as impacted, because I haven't heard clients talk about it all that much, because I don't know if maybe they have all these other things happening in their
Right.
life, or um it's been interesting though, because I was speaking to my husband about this last night, where this part of my heritage has been such a huge part of my identity my whole life. I've always been so proud of this part of who I am. And I'm going to say something a little judgy here, but it's kind of interesting or bizarre almost, because I feel like the country of Ukraine was not focused on or celebrated as much as it could have, should have, would have been for
Mhm.
years. Like, I don't know if it was just this, perfect storm where there's all these things happening around it in Europe, where finally all of a sudden there's this aha moment where everyone's realizing it was there all along. And so I'm ecstatic that there is, finally this long overdue focus on the wellness of the people there. But I have very complex emotions about it. So yeah, I don't know. It's a heavy topic.
It really is. And I'm sorry I had to throw that in. But
No, that's okay.
one
It's
of
what's
the
going on.
things, yeah, and one of the things I super appreciated that you said is that you felt last week that you just couldn't be there for that individual. You couldn't be present in the moment and you canceled the session, because I think sometimes we look at our doctors, our therapists, our
Mhm,
coaches as
mhm.
these just larger than life individuals who
Right.
can just handle everything and tackle it all and do it better than us. And so I appreciate you really humanizing that for
Mhm.
everybody.
Yeah, it's been maybe a handful of times my entire career I've done that, but it was just that day. I just wasn't, and I was. There are moments where I'm somewhat tactfully transparent with my clients, because I do think it's good for them to know that when I encourage them to practice boundaries and self care and vulnerability and transparency when it's appropriate, I'll do the same, as long as it's a teachable moment and it's not me trying to, refocus attention.
Right.
And so I actually let her know I have a trusting relationship with her. I've known her for a very long time, and I just said, I've just spoken to my family and I'm feeling a bit triggered right now with what's going on. And I feel like I might not hold good space for you today. So if it sounds good to you, I think maybe we should just cancel and I'll see you in 2 weeks. And she completely understood. So I didn't want her to just think that it was like out of nowhere I just
Mhm.
canceled. I thought it was a teachable moment, because I actually have been working on boundaries with her. So not between us, not
Mhm.
between us, but
Right.
her with other relationships.
So
So
it probably was really a great moment for you to, like you said, a great teachable moment.
mhm.
I like to give our listeners and viewers some teachable moments whenever I can. And that
Mhm,
is one of the reasons that I'm so glad that you are here with me today, because
mm,
I know what you talked about earlier with the whole mind body connection. I think
mhm,
so many people don't really realize is there. And I had a physical therapist actually located very close to you on not too long ago who
mhm,
talked a lot about that. So I would love it if you would talk a little bit about what some people might see as a physical manifestation of
mhm.
emotional trauma.
Absolutely. I think one of the most common words I would use would be the word tension. And there's also this, think about in music, actually, there's this phenomenon of tension and release. Like if you listen to a song that has like these really kind of pensive notes and then all of a sudden it settles, we're always kind of waiting for that release. And I think sometimes with trauma, you don't get the release. You don't you don't get the, I've had a stressful day and my muscles feel tight and my breathing is shallow. But at the end of the day, you know what? I can sit down, watch my cheesy TV. For me, it's The Bachelor. And can't wait to see what happens tonight. Um, and, because I'm walking around as not an acutely traumatized body, I can go down. I can decompress. I can get to that point. With trauma, there's not going to be that release. There's just this constant buzz or tension, and it can show up in a lot of the ways we would imagine fight flight. The tight muscles, the clenching of the jaw, increased heart rate, all of these things. Luckily, we're not going to walk around all the time like this, but there's going to be at least a hum of that.
Do you think it's difficult for survivors, I'll say, I don't want to call them victims,
Mhm.
to identify that and recognize it on their own?
I think sometimes it could be a matter of a lack of psychoeducation, which is something that is so important to me and probably the thing I almost enjoy the most. I enjoy the connection aspect of working with trauma clients, and then I also enjoy the psychoeducation because it's empowering. So that could be a piece of it. But the other thing I think is this tendency for our nervous system to normalize our experience. So I often will use the example of going in an airplane when you first sit down and they cut the engines on and everything gets going. It's so loud. Our nervous system gets a little bit of a jolt. But eventually, normally, you're going to forget about the engines. You're going to forget about all the noise unless someone's crying or snoring near you. Um, or actually, with COVID, if you hear coughing, you're going
Right.
to um, but so with keeping that in mind, when you are constantly walking around like that, it can be difficult because your body's going to become normalized to stress. And that could be some of the reasons why things like acute traumas can lead to chronic pain
Mhm.
or even other medical issues. And then also sometimes why it might be difficult to sense a dangerous situation or potentially dangerous relationship because you're already operating at a more stressed state.
That is really, really interesting to me because I feel like, I deal with a lot of chronic health issues that
Mhm,
probably relate back to some
mhm.
sort of abuse. So do you see that fairly often as well, where it is, chronic illness, autoimmune issues, things like that, that people are dealing with as well?
Yes, and this is, I think, an area of this work that is harder to specifically prove, and so I think there is a lot of inquiry happening right now about this. But I do think about one client of mine in particular who has been in a long term marriage, and her partner is definitely a narcissist and definitely controls what she does, how she speaks, what she says. He's always got to one up her and he always has an argument. And she ended up with thyroid disease. The interesting thing about her, and the thing about thyroid disease is it can be very genetic. I'm not saying that if you have thyroid disorder, you've been stifling your feelings in your throat. But what I found so remarkable about her situation is that when she started to get out of the house and exercise and changed her diet and started talking and was in therapy, her symptoms and her medication dramatically dropped, which is not very common with that disease or that. So that was kind of interesting how that can
Mhm.
manifest. So you have people who really strongly believe in this, who maybe practice chakra work or, naturopathic medicine, and see that what you manifest shows up in different parts of the body. And then you have those who are just, hard black or white science, who say that
Mhm.
couldn't be. So I think there's certainly value to it.
I agree. It reminds me of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And
I
I
mean, yeah, that's I can't even say I've had a podcast where that book hasn't come up because it is the holy grail of trauma. Mhm.
It really is. So I'll put some information on that. Scrolling at some point on here. I
Mhm.
know a lot of the work that you do is about empowerment, and it's getting through the abuse or the trauma and then how to move forward. And I
Mhm.
know that that is where a lot of our viewers and listeners struggle. They
Mhm.
feel unlovable. They feel that they can't trust anyone
Mhm.
again. They feel that they will just be better off alone.
Mhm.
So I would love for us to talk to those people for a little bit and talk
Mhm.
about some of the steps they can take to empower themselves after going through abuse and moving forward and becoming a survivor.
And I love the word survivor in context of this, because that is part of why survivors deserve and can go have these long-term loving relationships, healthy ones, because of the fact that you survived something. You did leave, you got out. And I want to speak to those people who maybe didn't even choose to leave, because I have heard that before, where circumstances made it where they had to leave and they weren't the one to choose it. And so they may minimize
Mhm.
their power and in their choosing because of the situation. You still survived and you still got out. When you have gone through something like that, I was talking before about your nervous system being acclimated to stress.
Mhm.
The interesting thing is that when someone goes through that, they have these new integrated skills. If you sit back and listen and believe in them, they're there, where you're going to be able to pick up on things. I mean, you said it's okay if I swear. I feel like your bullshit meter
Mhm.
will be a little bit more in tune than it was before. So there's that. That's a huge piece. Secondly, just listening to a podcast like this or reading books or educating yourself, you're going to start to learn things that you wouldn't have even been interested in learning prior. So now that you're learning, knowing that you are going to attract someone who kind of vibrates on the same frequency as you is really impactful. And that's one of the reasons I think I encourage people to take a beat after, get to know yourself without that controlling relationship. Some people forget what kind of food they like or movies they like or who they want to spend their time with. Like, figure out the things you love and then individualize yourself, express your differences, and don't be afraid to, from the very beginning, state a boundary, throw it out there. There really is no wrong time to throw a boundary out in the very beginning, because then you're going to weed out those relationships early on. It should be reciprocal. It shouldn't just be, well, they like me, so I like them. It's got to be a two-way street. I could keep going for a whole hour like this without even being interrupted, so I'll stop there.
I mean, I was all into it, so it was totally fine.
Mhm.
What do we say to those people who are afraid to get to know themselves? Because I think we see that a lot where
Mhm.
that's so scary and they don't want to do that. What are the steps they can take to not
Mhm.
be so afraid and to face themselves? Because they're
Mhm.
probably pretty great people.
Absolutely. Well, so first of all, everything doesn't have to be so serious. I think that's important to remember. When you've undergone something like abuse or any sort of complex trauma, interpersonal stress, it's okay to just have fun again with yourself. I love using the term of dating yourself, so doing the things that maybe you used to like to do when you were a kid, whether it be adult coloring books are all the craze, or going to a movie, or joining a new workout class. And it doesn't have to be in this really serious context of, I need to face my inner demons and figure out what went wrong. It can be, I just want to have fun with myself again. And that doesn't mean you have to be alone. I mean, I encourage people to reconnect with maybe relationships that hadn't been getting the focus that they could have before, or to get to know new people, or even other survivors can be really neat too, and very empowering to hear other people go through this. When you're ready, when you feel that foundation starting to come back, and when you feel that ability to decompress at the end of the day, even if just for a small amount of time, then maybe you can start digging a little bit. And actually, within the book, we talk about what was happening and give an opportunity for readers to journal straight into the book. Journaling's powerful. It can also be really heavy too. So some people like getting those journal prompts, those
Mhm.
books you get from, I was going to say Barnes and Noble, but any bookstore, and it has like, where do I see myself? And, those little prompts can be kind of fun. So,
I actually love that you said Barnes and Noble because one of our very loyal viewers works at a Barnes and Noble. And so this will
ah,
be like the third episode unprompted that somebody mentioned Barnes
nice.
and Noble. So there you go, Anna. That one was for you. And
Well,
we
Anna,
didn't
feel
even
free to
plan
reach
it.
out to me. No, just kidding.
There you go. Oh, she will. She will. I love that you said have fun because I
Mhm.
think so many people do think it has to be this like serious,
Mhm.
introspective
Yeah.
journey, this like hard. And yes, at some point it has to be those things, but
Right.
I love that you said like
Mhm.
just have fun, do
Mhm.
something cool.
Yeah.
How do you recommend that people start to rebuild some of those relationships? Because, we both know that isolation is quite frequently a tool used by abusers. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times the survivors are cut off from their family, their
Mhm.
friends. How can
Right.
they start to comfortably rebuild those relationships if it's appropriate to do so?
Well, one thing I can reassure you is that they want you to reach out. I think people who have undergone these situations get nervous thinking that people don't want to hear from them, or it's been forever. People want to hear from you. They really do. And the way that you reach out too can be fun and playful, or it could be really simple. It could be, let's go do something, but that might feel too much right now to be the one that's running in charge and making these things happen. So it could literally just be a text. Hey, I haven't reached out in a while. I know for some survivors, it can be really important to share some of what happened. And I'm not saying that that's pivotal to your healing from abuse, but it might allow you to feel more authentic and natural with that person that you'd lost touch with, and letting them know about the power of isolation, letting them know that is an abuse tactic that was utilized on you, and you did not choose to isolate yourself from that relationship, and you realize that that was unfortunately a symptom.
I know that you also talk about ways that people can prevent re-entering or entering another abusive relationship because we
Hmm.
do often see the
Hmm.
patterns happen. I know you
Right.
mentioned earlier that sometimes it's just vibrating on that different level and being in
Hmm.
that different energy, having
Hmm.
your bullshit meter tuned up
Hmm.
a little bit better. What are
Hmm.
some other strategies, though, that people can use or things they can work on in themselves that
Hmm.
will help them avoid
Hmm.
attracting that same person in a different body?
I think the very most important aspect, and I had slightly mentioned it earlier, is emotional individuation. So, figuring out ahead of time, maybe sit down, write down a list of the things that not only do you expect in a partner and hope for in a partner, but also what are things that are really important to you. I mean, I know when I met my now husband, when I met him, it was very important to me that I was not ever prevented from spending time with my girlfriends. That for whatever reason, I just didn't want to feel that sense of control. And so I think it was like our second date when I said to him, "Hey, by the way, I really value spending time with my girlfriends, and I don't really ever want to feel like you're going to keep me from that. So if that doesn't work for you, you should probably let me know because that's going to be something that's important to me." Fast forward years and years later, I probably don't go out with them as much as I mean, that was like early 20s when I said that. But I had to take the small risk that he might say, no, that's not going to work for me. But it was important to me. And it was important that I set that boundary really early on. So I think that's huge. So being okay with the fact that you are weeding people out. Um, I had a client the other day who was talking about feeling rejected a lot. She's divorced and she's looking for a much healthier relationship than she had before. And she just kept, telling me about all these different men that it wasn't working out and feeling like it was her. And I looked at her and I said, "You do realize that you are you're so ahead of them. You're ahead of the game here. You are calling out the stuff they're going to do before they even do it. And it's freaking them out. And so they're not sticking around because they're not good enough." And I know that's an overused statement, but it's true. Um, Another thing is reaching out to friends and family and getting their opinion is a good idea. So I'm not saying that you're going to decide whether or not to be with someone if your friend likes them. And, sometimes not everyone is going to love everyone you love. But if you have that group of trusted relationships and as a consensus, they are all not a big fan of the person that you're dating, it might be important to take a step and take a look at what is it that they're all saying and maybe take that to face value before you become isolated from those people.
I'm literally thinking of people right now that
Mhm.
fit that bill. But I know a lot of times when we're the individual in that relationship and we
Mhm.
hear those things, we
Mhm.
just don't want to listen. We want to duck from the red flags.
Mhm.
What makes so many of us do that versus kind of what you were saying, where you kind of set the boundaries early and we're like, if that doesn't work for you, like that's okay. Maybe this
Right.
isn't right for us. What
Mhm.
makes the different side of people where they just want to ignore the red flags and all their friends and family who probably know something if everybody's saying the same thing?
Right. I mean, it could be a combination of fear or potentially confidence. And here's the thing about confidence. I really want to put this out there. Confidence, it's like a chicken or the egg situation. You're not going to walk around and inherently feel confident before you walk around and do the actions or have the thoughts. So I remember during that time when I was dating, I remember telling a girlfriend, "I don't really necessarily believe this 100%, but I'm just going to tell myself anyone would be lucky to date me." And like having that be a mantra. And I didn't always feel that way. You can't see, I'm 5 foot tall. I would like, "Hey, I'm over here," like, so it's not, you're not going to walk around feeling 100% confident in everything all the time. But the mantra, it had a big impact on just my thoughts. And so I think having your own decision about your inner mantra of how you want to feel about yourself when you are dating. And I would love to gift that one, that you are all lucky, that anyone would be lucky to
Mm.
be with you, anyone. And if they aren't, then that's, there's, I don't know, 7 billion other people in the world. Um, but on the other hand, in addition to that, I was talking about fear. This could be connected to seeing unhealthy relationships in your past, to not feeling like you've ever really found that person that treated you with the respect you deserve. So it does take a bit of risk and courage, but you can do it. And I mean, it's everyone's going to go through those uncomfortable feelings until they find a person that's good enough for them and up to their, that vibration I was talking about.
I love that.
Mhm.
What are some baby steps that the people can take who feel like they're not good enough and they're not
Mhm.
worth
Mhm.
that other individual or putting their foot out there and taking that first step? What are some
Mhm.
little things they can do to ease their way towards that?
Mhm. I think, going back to what we were saying about dating yourself and doing things that you enjoy, if the focus is a little bit more on feeling like you're having fun with yourself and doing things that empower you and make you feel excited, it's going to carry over into just a general consensus about how you feel about yourself. But remember, I'm starting with you, not them. Like,
Mhm.
this has to start with you having that in a relationship before someone else is going to provide that. There should, in healthy relationships, be this phenomenon of expansion where, you bring your qualities, I bring my qualities, and this could be relationships, friendships, knowledge you have, and together we can learn and expand and become better in some ways. But that actually is completely separate from you make me happy or you are the reason I'm happy. You make me happy or you're the reason I'm happy have to be, I think these ideas of what a relationship is supposed to do needs to be reoriented because you make you happy. And that's where it has to begin. That interpersonal relationship with yourself first.
And I think that's where so many people unfortunately do struggle is they're
Mhm.
looking not for that addition, but they're
Mhm.
looking for that completion of
Yes, that's a
themselves.
good way of putting it. Definitely.
You
Mhm.
mentioned friendship,
Mhm.
and I really appreciate that because I feel like people do a lot of times focus on unhealthy romantic relationships
Mhm.
and not necessarily unhealthy friendships, which
Right.
I think do also exist.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you find that a lot of people are engrossed in both of those at the same time? So, for example, somebody in an unhealthy romantic relationship is also surrounded by unhealthy friendships or not? What do you see? Is there a trend there at all?
I think it depends on the person and their personality traits. Sometimes you're going to see people who have a trend of unstable interpersonal relationships overall. In our book, we talk about dialectical behavioral therapy skills, DBT skills, which are really powerful for helping people who struggle with most of their relationships. I mean, if you're struggling with most of your relationships, there is a common thread. And so learning some of those interpersonal effectiveness skills can be really powerful. If instead it feels like I'll say this, I have seen sometimes based on who the person struggled with in their childhood, they may struggle more in their adulthood. So if there's a woman who had issues with her father, I'm not trying to sound
Mm.
cliche, but she may find her romantic relationships to be a little bit more unstable, whereas some of her friendships might be where she really shines.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about maybe female friendships or even, even male friendships at times because there's no romantic context. So having that moment of insight about what kind of relationships do I struggle more with, and then what were my earlier relationships like, that can be pretty powerful to figure that out. Um, so I guess the answer is yes and no.
It's a solid maybe, it sounds like. It's a
It's a
solid
solid maybe. It's a solid 50-50.
love it. I want to talk a little bit about your book because I have not read it yet. I plan to, but what I loved was how you wrote it um, with another person, with a survivor, and you kind of gave it that dual perspective. So I would love if you would talk a little bit about how that came to be and how it was for you two to write that, maybe not together like you're sitting there together writing, but together.
Right. And it was interesting because we began writing it pre-COVID and finished writing it during COVID. And so I have these early memories of us having like coffee shop dates, talking about some chapter structure to where we obviously weren't seeing each other at all in person. So the book, I have not seen anything like it. It is a survivor story. Kendall Ann Combs, my co-author, and she is showing what happened beginning, middle, and end of her relationship. And every single chapter, we are following kind of the typical or anticipated trend that a relationship like that might go through based on what she went through. So that every chapter, it's her sharing a bit, like when she met, and then me following up every single chapter. The second half of the chapter is, here's the red flags. Here's what the research says. This is what she might have missed. This is what you could do if you didn't miss that. And then at the end of the chapter, she responds to what I said with what she knows now. And then we have a journal page for the reader to write what they know now. So it's an interesting structure because the first half of the book is all about her being in it leading up, and then her escape. I don't even want to give it away because it's a wild story. And then the second half, and it was so ironic when we were sitting doing some editing, because that's like 90% of writing a book is the formatting and editing. I said, oh my gosh, we're literally at the 50% mark on the book, where we got to the thriving part after, which
Mhm.
was really neat and kind of serendipitous. So the second half is all about, different research-based techniques and ways that you can thrive. The thing that I love about it too, as a clinician, I wish I had had a book like this to help me help survivors way before I wrote with her. And so you had asked what it was like to write with her. I learned a ton on this journey with her. There's things obviously as a clinician that I knew, but I never really was able to get that deep inside someone's story. Even though some of my clients had shared with me, she has been through it and out the other side now. So it was a hugely impactful experience, even just for my practice and how I work with my clients.
You may not know the answer to this because this is technically a her question, but do you
Hmm.
feel like it was harder for her to write it and be so vulnerable, knowing that you were going to come in and kind of answer those, or, here's the red flag you missed, here's the red flag you missed. Do you think
Hmm.
that was more difficult for her?
So just based on feedback I was receiving from her during the process, I'm going to guess, and again, I'm making an assumption that the biggest catharsis for her actually was the writing part of it. There were certain chapters that I remember her saying, like, wow, that was a really tough one. I need some self care time, which I thought was so awesome that she was able to pinpoint that. That's something that was so incredible about her, is I felt like she was up for it. Like, she was up for all the feedback I gave. And maybe that's because of where she's at in her journey. Like, this
Mhm.
was the right time for her to write a book like this. Had it been 5 years ago, or, at a different time, it probably maybe would have been a different experience. So I don't know. I'm going to ask her
I
that.
would love to know, I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question.
Was it harder for you to put down those issues and those red flags, knowing that she was going to see them right then and there? Were
Mhm.
you concerned about how she might feel, or did you approach it more as a clinician and, just here it is
Mhm.
in black and white?
I think because of the style clinician I am, it actually was incredibly organic and familiar for me. Anyone who has worked with me before knows that I'm not Freudian or psychodynamic whatsoever. I do not like to take a passive, uh, I don't know, passive stance with the work that I do. I love for the people that I work with to know what's going on when it's going on. And so I think the biggest thing is that if the way that I share it is with deep respect and empathy and compassion, then it's usually absorbed the right way by the other person. And so for readers who are going to read the book, I hope that at no point do you feel minimized or judged, because that's absolutely not the way that I approached it with her. And so that was super important for her to feel respected the whole time. And I mean, because I do, like, what she's overcome is incredible.
So you mentioned that it was the right time for her to write
Hmm.
the book. And I know writing a book and journaling are two entirely different things. But is
Hmm.
there ever a wrong time for somebody in a traumatic, unhealthy relationship? Is there a wrong time for them to journal or do certain activities? Or is it really, really individual based?
Well, I think there's never a wrong time to do something that you feel called to do. I think the only thing that would make something the wrong time is if you are rushing yourself into something because you feel the shoulda, woulda, couldas,
Hmm.
or because you want to check a box. So if you're feeling called to something, your body is so sophisticated, it will let you know that it's time. And so technically, I don't think there's anything wrong with whatever you feel inspired to do.
I love that once again you brought in the mind body
Hmm.
connection.
Hmm.
So it's really important to listen to yourself and trust your instinct and
Hmm.
not other people. I think a lot of times we feel that pressure, like you said, well, I have to forgive. I'm supposed to journal, so I better journal. Oh, somebody told me
Hmm.
I should take baths. I guess I'm going to do that. And they're just going through the motions of what other people are telling them to do.
I cannot wait for you to read the book because of what you just said about a bath. When you get to the bath part, I just need you to know that there were some swear words in the original version of that part that we decided to, to take out. So just insert those into the
Perfect.
sentences around that.
I can't wait now. I'm getting it immediately. I would love to hear your A1 tip top piece of relationship advice for the masses.
Mm. Sorry, I like totally paused because I'm like, what am I going to pick from all the different things?
I know there's so many, I know.
Well, okay, so if you don't mind, I'm gonna give one for people in committed relationships and maybe one for people seeking.
Love it.
Okay. So for those who are in committed relationships, I would say continue dating. And that can look different for everyone. It could be sitting down and doing a crossword puzzle together at night. It could be watching your favorite show together at night that you actually spend time and talk about. It could be committing to, I always talk about like the monthly date. That is the
Mhm.
thing that I try to convince all my clients to try to do. I try to stick to it as much as I can in my relationship. And my reason is this: where we place our energy is what grows. And so I've used the metaphor before with the gym quite often because I love working out. If you worked out once a month, you're not going to get much benefit. You're probably just going to be sore. So the same thing goes for committed relationships. If you're only making eye contact and talking once a month, what do you expect?
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the big things is energy. And I use the word dating because it's a socially constructed way of describing spending time together. But really, I'm talking about drips of energy because we don't want to store it all up for one day at the end of the month. As far as people seeking, I go back to that emotional individuation. Like, you have got to just be yourself. If you try to mold yourself into someone that someone wants, you are not going to be happy. Like, there is going to be a point in the relationship where you're constricted, whether it be you're not feeling yourself, you're not living that best version of yourself. It just, be an individual. And guess what? That applies to being in a committed relationship too. I mean, some of the best relationships I've seen are the ones where individuals are allowed to be their individual self.
I love both of those, and I feel like I get extra credit because we try to do the date night weekly versus
Yeah.
monthly.
If I didn't have really little kids, I think I'd try for weekly, but
So I'm just taking my gold star. That's all there is to it.
you should. You should. I mean, weekly, yes. Like, weekly is the ideal. I think pre little kiddos, that's what we did normally. But I always say, like, if you can at least do it monthly. But We do date nights in every week. So every
See,
week, yep, we do something together over the weekend, and even if it's just at home.
and that's what I love because we do that too sometimes. Sometimes that will be the date night is
Yeah.
let's watch a movie and grab a pizza and
Hmm.
have a fruity cocktail. So,
Yeah. Just not doing other things. Like put the phone down and and like look at your partner, hang with your partner. I will say one little skill that I think works really well for conflict that is not often talked about, because we talk about communication as like the the ultimate goal.
mhm.
Early in my career, for a stint, I was a guidance counselor, which is super random. And this, this was like when I was getting my license, and I'm like, summer's off, yeah. But I remember with the little kids, because I was in elementary
Mm,
school, if they had conflict, I would bring them into my office, and instead of asking them what happened, I would have them play 20 questions.
interesting.
Yes, and it always worked. And so that's actually a repair method that I use in my own relationship. If we have been just like floating aside and we're not connecting and we just keep having a lot of conflict, we'll have like a 20 questions night where we find online there's like so many
Mhm.
silly surveys you can do. You
Yes.
can, sit down with a glass of wine if that's what you want to do and get out your questions. And normally you don't even get through all of them because it just opens up conversation.
I love that. I
Mhm.
am working on my phone less. I do
Mhm.
have it on do not disturb now, and I've had that for like a month and I love it. So I'm getting
Mhm.
there. It's a start.
Oh, I'm not judging. I mean, I juggle a lot of hats, so I mean, I'm just as much listening to my own advice as I am giving it.
We have talked about some pretty heavy topics. So
Mhm.
I want to finish up our time with something a little bit lighter. We're
Okay,
going to talk about some tattoos.
awesome.
I love tattoos. You can't see any of mine right now because I'm in this weird plaid outfit, but
You're like, it's actually a tattooed plaid shirt.
right, right. Yeah, this is my newest tattoo. So, surprise. I think you have a tattoo
Mhm.
or a couple.
Well, so I have 1.5.
All right, that's going to be the story in itself. So, I want to hear about your favorite and I want to hear about point 5.
So, and this is, oh my gosh, my tattoo story is kind of ridiculous. So, I have the most supportive, empowering, wonderful mom who was totally cool with me getting a tattoo at 17. Like, signed the paper, went
Nice.
went with me. I think I had a couple friends with us, and I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to take, like, I think it was like baby Tylenol or something. I took something to make it not hurt, which is
Right.
ridiculous. And it's an angel. It's on my stomach. I was very curious how it would handle pregnancies. She's still doing okay. Um, but I finished up my tattoo, which I was a huge baby about. I get up and I just passed out, like straight on the ground, and not because of pain, because I took that stupid Tylenol. The guy after asked me if I had done anything like that. He goes, "No, you're not supposed to do that." I was like, "Okay, so word to the wise, if anyone's listening, just go with it.
Just
Like,
get it.
don't take anything." But I say point 0.5 because she was just gray scale, and I got her colored in college.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and I had been contemplating a potential sprig of lavender over my C-section scar, but I'm not sure yet. Like, I kind of love the scar, which almost feels like my own warrior tattoo.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm contemplating a potential other one, but I'm not sure. I am by no means up to your tattoo world, though.
Well, I can tell you my ridiculous first tattoo story, and my mom will be watching this. I also
Mhm.
got my first tattoo at the age of 17. I did
Hey.
not have parental permission though.
Oh.
This is how nerdy I was. I
Uh-huh.
called the tattoo place that morning
Uh-huh.
and asked
Mhm.
them if they checked IDs. Well, of course, they said yes. So
Yeah.
I gather up my fake ID and I drive over there. They never checked anything. They didn't,
Well, there you go.
nothing. So also got it in the same area as you.
Oh.
Much sillier than what you got though. I think yours has
What did you
probably, I
are
got
you are
Hobbs the Tiger. from Calvin and Hobbes.
That's
Because
awesome.
somehow at 17, that felt like the thing to do. He is still there. He is covered now, though. There is another tattoo
Oh,
on
that's
top
so
of
great.
him, but that is my 17-year-old tattoo story. So
I love it.
yours is better. Dr. Kelly, you have been amazing. I would love for you to tell people where they can find you if they want to grab your book, if they want to do therapy, yoga, any of the other like 87 things that you mentioned. If they want to just come to Cary and talk about New York professional sports teams, where can people find you?
So to talk about sports, just kidding. So ameliakelly.com, and that's Kelly with an EY. I have links on there to all of my social media, but you can go on Dr. Amelia Kelly on Instagram. My book, What I Wish I Knew, Surviving and Thriving After an Abusive Relationship. You can find it at all retailers, Barnes& and Noble, Target. My graphic designer said he found it in Japan.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. The internet's wild, but also the book has a Facebook page, What I Wish I Knew the book, and lots of different resources. Some of my meditation offerings are on Insight Timer. I don't know if any of your listeners have used it or if you've used it.
I have, yes.
I love Insight Timer. I'm in the works right now of creating a live stream class for highly sensitive persons,
Nice.
which is a huge passion of mine. If you ever want to do another episode,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and yeah, so I'm out there, and I just started a weekly Q&A with Dr. K, where people can ask questions, and I will give you well-researched but supportive, empathized answers. So
I love it. Well, Dr. Kelly, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for everything that you shared and for your tattoo story. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
I really hope you guys enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Kelly as much as I did. I truly appreciate how she shared that when you're rediscovering yourself, it's okay to have fun. It doesn't have to be so serious right from the start. So remember, until next week, you are strong enough and you are worth it.